Good morning.
Good morning, Governor.
Buongiorno. As you know, I just returned from a trade mission to Europe and had an opportunity to go over there with 23 different companies from Utah and had over 50 meetings in a very compact period of time. And I can tell you we had a great opportunity to see some wonderful sights, meet with wonderful people. But there's no place like home. It's great to be back. And again, we have wonderful scenery here and wonderful people, and I hope we appreciate the successes that Utah is having compared to other parts of the world and even other parts of our country. The fact that our economy is very healthy, most diverse, healthy economy in the world, 2.9% unemployment rate, job opportunities, GDP growth, on average 3.5%, some areas 5 to 6%. Personal income is up, leading the nation. Again, I hope we appreciate the great quality of life we have here. I know, having gone out of the country and then coming back, I'm reminded of the blessing of being here in Utah and living in this great country. That being said, again, with our opportunities with trade missions to improve relationships, to meet with people, to have mutual exchange, particularly for economic opportunity, is not insignificant. We were able to reinforce relationships, for example, with Stadler Rail, who's now made Salt Lake City their national headquarters of North America. And again, they're going to now expand even more than we thought as far as creating more job opportunities here in Utah. We had the opportunity to go to the Paris Air Show. As you know, one of our sectors that's growing dramatically is aerospace. I mean, with the leaders of so many different companies there, and this clearly, Utah is on their radar screen as a place they would like to be at or expand into, opportunities for us to manufacture, whether it be composite materials or Boeing expanding their footprint here for parts of the Boeing Airlines, Northrop Grumman. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And I do believe that with what we've met, whether it be aerospace, life sciences, agribusiness, which are all represented on this trade mission, we will create over the next few years 4,000 to 8,000 new jobs here in the state of Utah. Career opportunities for people. So these trade missions are important on many different levels. Maybe the highlight for me was a little non-traditional in that we had an opportunity to meet with His Holiness Pope Francis. And that was an important occasion and really an opportunity for me to meet the fellow who's probably the most recognized personality in the world. 1.2 billion Catholics in the world, and certainly he's recognized for his compassionate service and his care for the underprivileged. Had an opportunity to meet with Pietro Parolin, who's Cardinal, and is the number 2 in command. Had an extended opportunity to talk to him for about an hour. And we talked about the importance of serving mankind, not based on their religion or their non-religion, but their humanity, and seeing what can we all do as our responsibilities to lift people up and to help them have a better circumstance in life. Interesting conversation we had, and I wholeheartedly agree with the Cardinal in that effort. And last but not least, again, the opportunity of meeting with the Pope, and his last comment to me was a little bit surprising. He said to me and to Jeanette, the First Lady, "Would you pray for me?" And, you know, people come from all over the world to the Vatican asking for the Pope's blessing on them. And for him to say to Jeanette and I, "Would you pray for me?" Was a lesson to be learned. Again, I think it's important that we all consider praying for those, even though we have a difference of opinion on philosophy and politics, or I come from a different faith than the Pope comes from. But the idea that we ought to pray for each other's success and help us to do better for mankind is an important aspect of this trip. And I want you to know I've added to my prayers Pope Francis and his leadership team for the Catholic Church and others. Again, we're in a time when we see a lot of differences and contention and conflict, when we ought to be cheering for the success of those that are on the same team, even though we have maybe different roles and different positions that we play. So that's probably going to be my most memorable thing for this trade mission, and maybe the best souvenir I'm going to take back from Europe is the comments from the Pope and the Catholic Church to me and Jeanette. So with that, what questions would you have for me today?
Well, Governor, the first debate for Salt Lake City Mayor happened last night, and I'm wondering what your impressions were of the debate, specifically about air quality and working with the state legislature.
Well, on air quality, certainly something the state's taking very seriously, so it's a common issue. Again, we have inversions here, and that compounds whatever pollution we have. We've put into the budget this past year, with the help of the legislature, a little less than what I'd wanted, but we still have $28 million going into, in fact, air quality issues. That's a lot of money. That's a good down payment. And the success we've had in reducing the pollution ought to be recognized. Doesn't mean we're where we want to be, but at least applaud the effort and the fact that we're trending in the right direction. So air quality, for a lot of reasons, is certainly ought to be top of mind for everybody, all elected officials, including those running for the mayor of Salt Lake City. A very important issue for me is this idea that I hear expressed of better collaboration and cooperation from Salt Lake City, our capital city, with, in fact, the state of Utah. And I think that's really significantly important. We have not seen that a lot in the past. We need to see that more in the future. And so I hope that whoever is elected to be the mayor of Salt Lake City in this next go-around understands they need to work with the governor, with the legislature. There's more that we have in common than we have differences. And again, as evidence of that, keep in mind, when we pass legislation at the state level, Republicans and Democrats working together on issues, 95% of those pieces of legislation this past session were passed virtually unanimously. We can come together. We ought to come together, and we should come together. I'm looking forward to have better cooperation with the future mayor of Salt Lake City.
Is there anyone particularly you're favoring right now?
Not really. I'm not going to step out and say there's some good choices out there that I like. I think Aaron Mendenhall did a really good job as the chairman of the council in stepping forward when we had problems with the inland port and bringing the council along. Luz Escamilla, again, a very good legislator who certainly understands the issues there in her district in Rose Park, and as a part of the legislature, I think has the ability, in fact, to bring people together. David Ibarra, again, a business person, who's somebody that I think understands the free market system, and that's an important aspect of leadership, understanding how the system works and how it can work better. So those are three. I hope we have somebody, again, that has good values, good principles, and is willing to cooperate and collaborate with the state. That's what I'm looking for.
Governor, I wanted to ask what the status is of negotiations with the legislature over the ban on conversion therapy on LGBTQ children. As you know, the Salt Lake County Council recently passed a resolution calling for the legislature to pass a ban. So what's happening with that? You've been involved in the talks.
Well, thank you. I anticipated that question today, Ben, and thank you for asking about it. It's certainly an issue that has some significant emotion to it. Probably on all sides of the issue, by the way, parental rights, what we have as correct therapy, what should be appropriate, what should not be appropriate, and how do we resolve some of those differences and conflicts. And so to that end, starting here a number of weeks ago, in working with the legislature and with others involved in this issue, I've sent a letter to our Department of Commerce, Francine Gianni, and let me just read to you, if I could, here what the first paragraph of a letter is, and I can make copies of this available to anybody who'd like to have one. But dear Francine, I am directing you today in your capacity as overseeing the Division of Occupational and Professional Licensing to have the Psychologist Licensing Board provide additional guidance for the development of rules on the ethical and professional practice of psychology in Utah. This needs to be done in an area that should be governed by the best available science rather than left to unregulated or regulated in a manner that is colored by politics. Specifically, I want the state to ethically regulate psychological interventions for minor children regarding their sexual orientation and gender identity. I'd like those proposed rules to be available for public comment no later than September 16th of 2019. So we're going to turn this to the licensing people. They'll use the best available science. They'll have the opportunity to see what works and what doesn't work, what should be done, what shouldn't be done. The public will have an opportunity to weigh in on that issue. It will save us time. It will take it out of the political arena. That does not mean it forecloses on future legislation. But we don't need to wait till 2020 to deal with this. This will help us get a leg up and probably get some better insight. And I think all parties in this issue will, I think, should applaud this effort to direct it to the professional licensing.
So this is a directive from your office to one of your agencies to regulate conversion therapy, if I understand you correctly?
That's right. They have the right to say rules and regulations on licensing and professionals anyway. What are the rules for beauticians? You know, what are the rules for plumbing? What are the rules for this or that? So we're going to have, there's a number of boards involved in this, and again, the complete letter you can see. But particularly, I'm wanting to have the psychologist licensing board provide guidance, rules and regulations. What are the parameters? What can you do? What can you not do based on good science and public input? And they will come up with some rules, and I want that available by September 16th of this year.
So what do you want it to say? No conversion therapy? Conversion therapy is okay? Conversion therapy is okay so long as it's not abusive? What do you want it to say?
I certainly have some concerns about some of the abuse that I've heard talked about, but I'm not a psychologist. This is not my background. I'm going to rely upon the experts to tell us what should be done or not be done, or how it should be done. Again, I'm not putting any limitations on what will be discovered and what will come out of this review and this analysis, but I expect we'll have some recommendations available for the public to make comment on September 16th of this year. That'll put us in line to say, do we need additional legislation? Do we, in fact, is the license and the rules and regulations that come out of our Department of Professional Licensing adequate enough? We don't need anything more? I don't know. I'm not going to say this is what we should have or not have. That's not my expertise. But these folks have the expertise and will have the ability to get expertise to give us guidance.
But this proponents of this have said that so long as it's not abusive, opponents have said that all of this is abusive. Where do you stand as the man who's issuing the directive?
I don't know that everything is being done is abusive. Again, that's not my expertise. Like asking me to come and fix the plumbing in your, how would you like to fix the plumbing in your house? And I'm saying that's not my job. That's not what I'm qualified to do. But I know we can hire plumbers that are qualified, and architects and those that need to tell us how to put the plumbing in your house. So I'm looking to the experts to, in fact, have this discussion with other experts and give us some rules and regulations which we can take a look at as a public, and hopefully give us the parameters necessary to bring us together on this issue and say this is the right approach for Utah to take when it comes to conversion therapy. But it's, you know, I mean, that's quite a large gamut, whether it's sexual orientation, same-sex attraction, gender identity, all those things, and they're not all necessarily the same.
Are you expecting some sort of enforcement policy to come out of this too?
I don't know. We'll see what the recommendations are.
And by doing this, you're bypassing the legislature. How do you think that's going to go over?
I've already vetted it with the legislature. They like what we're doing. I think this is a good approach to take. It doesn't mean that there won't be future legislation, but this brings the science together and the people that are involved in this kind of therapy. It allows parents to, in fact, weigh in and talk about what their concerns are, and we have differences of opinion. Again, this is where we kind of bump up against parental rights. What is my right to raise my children and give them the therapy I think they need or the treatments I think are important versus what the science tells us, if that's an opposing point of view? I don't know. I hope they reconcile. But this will give us an opportunity, and we don't have to wait till next January to start this conversation. I'm starting it now. And this will be, I think, a good process for us to follow, and that might lead to new legislation. We'll have to wait and see.
Any concerns about a legal challenge if somebody doesn't like the way the rules go?
You know, it seems like litigation is a part of society, unfortunately, all too often, so I wouldn't want to presuppose that we won't have litigation, but I don't know why we would. Again, this is a good process for bringing experts together and seeing what the process develops. So we're just following kind of the rules we already have on the books.
Governor, what do you think of the Supreme Court decision today that came down on gerrymandering?
Well, I haven't had a chance really to review it, other than I've heard that the comments really are that this is not a federal issue as it's been presented. This is a state issue, and that's probably where a lot of us thought it was anyway. And so the legislature does have the right to create rules on how we, in fact, redistrict. And the public has spoken on a very narrow margin, but I expect that we will, in fact, follow that as a blueprint and kind of how we will, in fact, direct the legislature to, in fact, redistrict at the appropriate time. So I don't know that it impacts us all that much. It just helps maybe give some clarification. This is a state issue.
Governor, do you personally think there need to be rules around how the maps are drawn for partisan interests?
I think guidelines are important, helps the legislatures. They try to decide how to draw the lines. You know, those who are involved in elections are concerned about we gerrymander, and so it makes it difficult for one party or the other party. And it probably has worked both ways in the state of Utah. There's some areas that seem to be Democrat strongholds and some of the Republican strongholds. And how do you carve up the state to make it fair for everybody and get the appropriate representation? Not necessarily an easy thing to do, but I do know the last time we did it that Democrats and Republicans unanimously agreed to the legislative redistricting. The only controversy seems to be whether we've got the congressional seats redistricted correctly, and whether you have a pinwheel design or carve it up a different way. That'll probably be part of the discussion, the debate as we go forward, and I'm anxious to see what the legislature comes up with.
But there's a popular topic of infrastructure, both at the national and local level, and some of our press corps are still assembling data on water treatment issues in the state relative to nutrient pollution and toxic algae blooms. But one thing that came up just recently at a conference was unreinforced masonry and buildings in the state that are really in bad shape regarding a vulnerability for earthquake damage. They said, and this is a quote, a 6.5 category earthquake will destroy Utah's economy, mostly due to the fact that we have weak zoning and ordinances, weak building codes, and have done little in the past 40 years to demolish or retrofit unsafe buildings. What do you think is necessary?
Who said that, Mike?
Pardon?
Who said that?
Somebody in the Fix the Bricks program here, part of the state monitoring here, one of the authorities there.
Well, you've done it again. You found something that I am not all that familiar with as far as the report or the study or the recommendation. Clearly, I know that when it comes to our infrastructure needs, whether that be access to water and make sure that our water is potable and usable, that's a big issue for me and something we're doing significant efforts on as far as making sure we have water to accommodate the growth of Utah over the next 50 years. And infrastructure needs, whether that's roads, highways, byways, mass transit, how we deliver water, in our canals. I know we spend a lot of money at the Capitol to, in fact, not only go back and refurbish the Capitol, but also to earthquake-proof it for up to a 7.0 earthquake. Others are doing that in the private sector. It's hard to go back and say to somebody, if you've already built a building, by the way, a city or a county saying you've got to now retrofit or go back and spend millions of dollars on your building. If you build a new one, though, that's not as hard for them to say, if you're going to build a new structure here, here's some additional things you've got to do, as we are smarter now when it comes to earthquakes than we were 20 or 30 years ago. So it's a combination of probably all those things working together to make sure that we are, as safe and sound as we can possibly be.
One of the recommendations coming out of that conference apparently was that there'd be a 10-year period of time for multi-unit buildings that are soft ones that are vulnerable. By the way, a 6.5 earthquake is far less than what I've personally experienced twice in California. But they're saying that 10 years, give the building owners 10 years to either demo or retrofit, and then start finding them in terms of public safety. Primarily.
Yeah, again, if there's a recommendation out there, it ought to be considered in the legislature. The zoning is mostly involved with cities, so we ought to work with the League of Cities and Towns as well as the Utah Association of Counties. It really falls under their purview whether they want to change or modify or enforce new zoning laws. So again, that may be bubble up and maybe something for the upcoming legislative session.
Governor, back on the issue of the Supreme Court's ruling on partisan gerrymandering, do you plan to ask the legislature to consider or accept the recommendations that this independent commission set up that voters approved under Prop 4, or is it back to the proverbial drawing board, just accept what the legislature does?
I think they're going to listen to the will of the people, and again, although it passed by about 1%, I think some recommendations in that are probably very appropriate to be considered as they, in fact, redistrict. So I don't think it's a matter of me encouraging them. I think they'll do that just as a matter of course, and I think that's important. I think we want to have people feel like that how we redistrict has some fairness to it, that it's really not just a political decision, but it's really designed to, in fact, help the people have fair and adequate representation in whatever the office is that they are voting upon. So I think the legislature will do the right thing in the right way.
Any opinion on the census question being blocked for now by the U.S. Supreme Court? That's a big issue that goes into redistricting.
Yeah, I've been told it passed unanimously, but it also had sub-issues that were divisive, and so they've not all agreed on some of the subheadings of that issue. I know we don't want to, impugn anybody's civil rights, and we're very sensitive to the question of whether you're a citizen or not. Although knowing who are citizens and who are not in our society probably helps us as far as developing policy. So it's probably a piece of information that's probably helpful. The question that goes beyond that is whether you're legal or undocumented. And so that gets to be a little bit more emotional. And of course, as you know, Utah's been very friendly and should be to refugees and to immigration folks. We have a significant belief in compassion and humanity of people and wanting to keep families together and all those things which I think are important values that represent Utah.
Governor, there's been talk of a special session to appropriate funding for the census. Do you think that's necessary, or is the state ready?
Well, I don't know where the budget line item is there. If we're inadequate, well, that'll be corrected in the upcoming legislative session. But we've anticipated, I think some money has been set aside, whether it's adequate or not. As we get closer to the census next year, we'll probably have an opportunity to beef up that fund and make sure that we have adequate funds to do an appropriate census evaluation in Utah.
Governor, there's potentially a ballot initiative in 2020 that would impose a carbon tax to help with air quality and to provide rural Utah economic stimulus. Do you have a position on that yet?
I don't really have a hard position. I'm not opposed to looking at a carbon tax. The intent is to pay for the cost of carbon and what it does to our air quality. I think everybody supports having cleaner air. We certainly want to have potable water, and so these environmental concerns are important. We are actually making change that's occurring without the carbon tax. So the question is, do you need it? It will accelerate change to greener power or not? I'm not certain. Again, we just announced at our Energy Summit some significant opportunities for greener fuel, whether it be geothermal, combination with hydro. We have wind power, solar. We are the largest user of wind power in the Intermountain West. as a state. We're exporting a lot of solar power now to California, geothermal to California, and opportunities to come together. So again, it's happening. We know that the public wants to have sustainable, reliable energy. They want to have it affordable, and they want to have it cleaner. That clearly is happening. Right now, for example, we've reduced our reliance on coal from 85% of our energy portfolio to 65%. That's a significant reduction. We've increased our greener fuels from 1% to 11%. That's a significant increase. So the market itself is shaping, what's happening for energy production, and Utah is at the forefront of all of the above approach in a free market system.
So you're not opposed to a carbon tax. How does that factor into any discussions with tax reform? Even should this pass, are you suggesting that maybe the legislature look at that? I'm
suggesting we ought to consider all things. I'm saying I'm not sure that the carbon tax will change the outcome, but it's certainly worth a discussion. I'm not supporting it. I'm not opposed to it. I'm willing to have the discussion.
One thing that we know about, Governor, that you have really championed over 5 years or more that I'm aware of, is trying to get Utahns covered with their health care. Attorney General Barr is trying to get the courts to strike down the law that makes it so that pre-existing conditions are not a problem for people, and there are many that are normal and out there. How does Utah weigh in on this, given the fact that you have really worked hard on this issue?
Well, there's a lot of opinions out there, and so anybody can issue an opinion, and William Barr is no exception. That being said, we're trying to, in fact, do kind of our approach on health care. We're waiting for our waivers to come in. We've got the first part done. I think the Department of Health is very supportive of what we're doing. I think the White House is supportive. I still hope that we'll have our waivers by the end of this summer so that we can move ahead and make sure that our experience here in Utah has access to good quality health care at affordable prices. We're leading the nation, frankly, when it comes to quality of health care at lower cost.
Well, Governor, thank you very much. We're out of time. We won't see you in July. We'll see you in August.
Looking forward to it. I'm starting to count the days already.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think we're
Go ahead.
okay. So I kind of made reference to this, but you're not going to be here in July. I'm wondering, this is a time, an opportunity for you to reflect on Statehood Day, Pioneer Day on July 24th. And do you have any comments about that you'd like to share with us?
Well, it's our unique state holiday, and it celebrates those pioneers who came into this valley in 1847. We'll have a big parade. We'll have an opportunity to reflect upon the progress the state's made in all these years since they came into the valley, since our statehood in 1896. And again, I mentioned in the opening part that I'm very proud of our state. We are really doing well in so many areas, and it's because of those who pioneer. Now, you can be the Brigham Young generation pioneers of some of my ancestors, those who came, the early 1900s and colonized here. We celebrated the joining of the Transcontinental Railroad. It brought more pioneers here and the ability to colonize in a different way and make it more easy and less drudgery in the quest across the country. We have pioneers coming today, which are blazing new trails and making it better for all of us. So that pioneering spirit, which is kind of a can-do, whatever the challenge is, if we lock arms and work together, we can accomplish about anything we'd like to do. That really is the spirit of Utah. That's represented in that 24th of July celebration. And again, whether you're a sixth-generation pioneer like me, or if you're a first generation, like people are moving in, and now the fastest-growing state in America, and they're just here for their first year, all of us working together with that pioneer can-do spirit will make Utah continue to succeed and to celebrate excellence, and as we kind of are a good example to the rest of the country and the world.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Duty calls.
Thank you.
Good to be back.